Listen carefully and don't just rush past this message. If you click away right now, you may miss an opportunity to think differently about your financial life. But if you stay with me, I want to share a simple faith-based lesson about how your thoughts, words, habits, and actions can influence the way you approach provision and abundance. Just a few days ago, a single father named Elias in Chicago, who had once reached the point of pawning his winter coat during a difficult season, completed a major business transaction that completely changed his financial situation. Last Thursday, a nurse in Manila who had been crying over thousands of dollars in credit card debt reached a place where she could begin providing for her parents in a completely different way. Now, I want you to understand something. These stories are not proof that carrying an object automatically produces money. They are reminders that a person's financial life can change when their thinking, discipline, faith, decisions, and expectations begin to change. There was a time when I was drowning in debt myself. I remember how uncomfortable it could feel to sit with other people when you knew you could not afford the same things they could. Sometimes you would rather disappear than admit that money was tight. But things can change when you stop allowing fear to control your thinking and begin learning how to handle money with wisdom, faith, patience, and purpose. None of this requires rich parents, an Ivy League education, or working yourself into exhaustion every single week. There are principles you can begin practicing today. Maybe right now you are thinking, this sounds strange. Perhaps you are wondering why anyone would talk about carrying certain objects in a pocket. I understand that reaction. But listen carefully. The objects themselves are not magical. They do not create wealth. They do not command money to appear. They are simply reminders. They can serve as physical points of contact that remind you of the thoughts and words you have decided to practice. The real issue is not the object. The real issue is what is happening inside you. Maybe you've been working harder and harder, doing everything you know to do, yet money still seems like a constant struggle. You see other people moving forward while you are continually worrying about bills, debts, responsibilities, and unexpected expenses. You wonder why some people seem to have opportunities while you always seem to be fighting just to survive. But I want you to understand something important. Your financial struggle is not always only about the amount of money in your bank account. Sometimes the deeper battle is in the way you think about money, provision, opportunity, work, and your own ability to move forward. Think about the thoughts you have carried for years. Maybe you grew up hearing that money was always difficult to obtain. Maybe you constantly heard, we can't afford that, there is never enough, or people like us don't become wealthy. Perhaps your parents were afraid of losing everything, and that fear became part of the atmosphere in which you grew up. Maybe your grandparents lived through difficult financial seasons, and those experiences shaped the way your family thought about provision. These patterns can become deeply rooted. You may consciously desire financial stability while unconsciously expecting disappointment. Your mouth may say, I believe things will improve, while your inner thoughts continually say, something will go wrong. You may pray for provision, but spend the entire day imagining failure. You may ask God for opportunity while constantly talking yourself out of taking wise opportunities when they appear. But hear this, you are not permanently trapped in an old pattern. You can learn new ways of thinking. You can renew your mind. You can change the words you speak. You can develop better financial habits. You can learn to make decisions from faith rather than panic. You can become disciplined without becoming fearful. You can believe God for provision while also taking responsibility for the opportunities placed in front of you. This is where symbols and reminders can sometimes be useful. Human beings respond strongly to images, repetition, memories, and physical reminders. Throughout history, people have used symbols to represent courage, authority, protection, opportunity, and victory. The important thing is not that the object possesses supernatural power. The importance is what the object reminds you to believe, remember, and practice. Think about ancient pictures and symbols. People have always used images to remind themselves of what they wanted to accomplish. A person preparing for a hunt might visualize success before entering the field. In modern life, people use vision boards, written goals, affirmations, journals, and reminders on their phones. These things do not magically produce results, but they can help keep a person's attention focused on the direction they have chosen. That same principle can be used with the three simple objects we are discussing. They are not magical objects. They are reminders. They are physical anchors for a renewed way of thinking. They can remind you to stop speaking constantly about lack and start speaking about God's provision, wisdom, opportunity, diligence, and responsible stewardship. The first object is an old-fashioned key. You don't need an expensive key. You don't need something rare. You could use a simple key that has meaning to you. Throughout history, a key has represented access, opening, opportunity, and entrance. When you hold that key, let it remind you that you are asking God for wisdom to recognize the right doors and courage to walk through the doors that truly belong to your assignment. Don't look at that key as if it contains financial power. It doesn't. Instead, let it remind you of a truth. Closed doors do not mean your entire future is closed. One opportunity ending does not mean every opportunity has ended. One rejection does not mean you are rejected forever. God can give you wisdom to recognize new possibilities. When you feel that key in your pocket, let it remind you to say, Lord, give me wisdom to recognize the opportunities you place before me. Help me walk through the right doors. Help me avoid doors that would lead me away from your purpose. Give me wisdom in my work, my business, my decisions, and my finances. That is a much healthier way to use a symbol. The second object is a small magnet. Again, don't misunderstand the lesson. A physical magnet does not attract money from heaven. It is simply a reminder. Think about what a magnet does naturally. It pulls certain things toward itself. When you carry one, allow it to remind you that you should become intentional about what you are attracting through your thoughts, words, habits, and actions. Instead of continually saying, nothing ever works for me, begin saying, I am learning, I am growing, I am becoming wiser, I am prepared for good opportunities, I am trusting God for wisdom and provision. Instead of constantly expecting failure, begin expecting yourself to make better decisions instead of thinking that you must chase money desperately every hour of the day. Learn to work faithfully. Develop your skills, serve people well, and recognize opportunities when they come. Let that magnet remind you that your attention matters. What you continually focus on influences what you notice. If you are constantly looking for problems, you will notice problems everywhere. If you begin training yourself to look for solutions, opportunities, lessons, and possibilities, you may begin noticing things you previously ignored. The third object is a small piece of cinnamon. Cinnamon has been associated with prosperity and blessing in different traditions, but again, we must keep the lesson clear. Cinnamon does not possess a supernatural ability to make you rich. Do not turn a simple reminder into superstition. If you choose to carry a small cinnamon stick, let the scent remind you of gratitude, diligence, provision, and faith. Every time you notice that familiar smell, Allow it to bring your mind back to the words you have chosen to speak. Say, God is my source. I will not live in fear. I will use wisdom. I will work diligently. I will be a good steward. I will recognize opportunities. I will not allow fear of lack to control my decisions. That is the kind of inner transformation that matters. Start your morning simply. Before you put these objects into your pocket, stop for a moment. Hold the key in your hand. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Think about the doors you need God to open, not merely doors that make you richer, but doors that bring you into the right work, the right opportunities, the right relationships, and the right responsibilities. Then speak clearly. I trust God for wisdom. I trust God for provision. I am learning to recognize opportunities. I will walk through the right doors. I will not allow fear to control me. I will not constantly speak words of lack. I choose faith, wisdom, diligence, and gratitude. Say it again. I open my heart to God's wisdom. I open my mind to new possibilities. I open myself to opportunities that are consistent with God's will. I will be faithful with what I already have. Now understand something important. Faith does not mean sitting on the couch waiting for money to fall from the sky. Faith acts, faith works, faith learns, faith obeys, faith makes wise decisions, faith refuses to be ruled by fear. If you are walking into a bank, going to a job interview, entering a business meeting, or going on a project, applying for a position, or sitting down to pay your bills, don't let fear dominate your thoughts. Take a moment and breathe, then say, I will not panic. I will think clearly. I will make wise decisions. I will not be controlled by fear. I believe God can give me wisdom to handle this situation. That changes the way you approach the situation. When you use the magnet, let it remind you of your goals. Maybe you are trying to pay off debt. Maybe you are trying to save money. Maybe you are trying to build a business. Maybe you are looking for employment. Maybe you are trying to become financially responsible after years of poor decisions. Hold the magnet and remind yourself, I am moving toward my goal. I am not running from my responsibilities. I am becoming disciplined. I am becoming wiser. I am taking one step at a time. Notice the difference. You are not desperately chasing money. You are becoming the kind of person who can handle money wisely. You are not begging for an instant miracle while refusing to change your habits. You are preparing yourself to recognize and manage provision when it comes. And let me make this absolutely clear. These objects do not contain secret magical powers. The key is not magical. The magnet is not magical. The cinnamon is not magical. They cannot force money to appear. They cannot override God's will. They cannot replace wisdom. They cannot replace work. They cannot replace responsibility. They cannot replace prayer. They cannot replace sound financial decisions. They are simply reminders. The real transformation happens in your thinking, your faith, your words, and your actions. Your mind is powerful because what you repeatedly think about can influence the choices you make. If you continually expect failure, you may stop taking reasonable opportunities. If you continually expect rejection, you may never apply for the job. If you continually expect poverty, you may become afraid to learn about money. If you continually tell yourself that you cannot change, you may never give yourself permission to grow. But you can begin again. You can learn, you can change, you can become disciplined. You can ask questions, you can study, you can improve your skills. You can become a better steward. And you can trust God while you do it. Think of these objects as training wheels. When a child first learns to ride a bicycle, the training wheels provide support. Eventually, the child learns balance and no longer needs them. The goal was never to keep the training wheels forever. The goal was to learn, use these reminders in the same way. At first, Perhaps you need something physical to remind you to stop speaking negatively about your finances. Later, you may not need the object at all. You will have developed the habit of speaking with faith and wisdom. At first, you may need a reminder to pause before making an emotional financial decision. Later, that pause becomes natural. At first, you may need something to remind you of your financial goals. Eventually, those goals become part of your daily discipline. That is growth. But there is another important principle. Do not become obsessed with the outcome. Desperation can make people make terrible decisions. When someone becomes desperate for money, they may take risks they would never normally take. They may believe every promise they hear. They may fall for scams. They may spend money they cannot afford to lose because someone promised instant wealth. Don't do that. Faith is not foolishness. Faith does not mean believing every financial promise someone puts in front of you. Faith works with wisdom. Faith works with patience. Faith works with discipline. Faith does not require you to abandon common sense. So carry your reminders if they help you, but do not obsess over exactly how or when money will arrive. Instead, trust God, do your part, and remain alert to legitimate opportunities. You don't have to know every detail today. You don't have to know exactly what tomorrow will bring. You need to take the next wise step. Maybe your next step is making a budget. Maybe your next step is applying for a job. Maybe your next step is learning a skill. Maybe your next step is paying one debt. Maybe your next step is starting to save a small amount. Maybe your next step is asking someone experienced for advice. Maybe your next step is ending an unnecessary expense. Maybe your next step is building a product or service that genuinely helps people. Whatever that next step is, take it. And while you take it, keep your heart and faith say, God is my source, and I will be a faithful steward of what He places in my hands. That statement changes your perspective. You are no longer saying, I am helpless. You are saying, I can learn. You are no longer saying there is never enough. You are saying, I will become wise with what I have. You are no longer saying, money controls me. You are saying, I will make responsible decisions. And you are no longer allowing fear to become the loudest voice in your life. Now I want you to make a simple commitment. Write down the date you are beginning this new way of thinking about your finances. You can write today's date and say, I am beginning again. Then write one practical financial goal, not 10, just one. Maybe it is paying off a specific debt. Maybe it is saving your first emergency fund. Maybe it is finding better work. Maybe it is learning a new skill. Maybe it is starting a small business. Then pray over that goal and ask God for wisdom. And remember this, don't measure your progress only by the amount of money you have today. Measure your progress by the person you are becoming. Are you more disciplined? Are you more patient? Are you making better decisions? Are you wasting less? Are you learning more? Are you working faithfully? Are you managing what you already have? Are you becoming less controlled by fear? Those are signs of progress. Sometimes the greatest financial breakthrough begins before the money arrives. It begins when your thinking changes, when you stop seeing yourself as powerless, when you stop allowing shame to control you, when you stop running from your financial responsibilities, when you begin learning, when you begin planning, when you begin believing that change is possible, when you begin taking action, and when you begin trusting God while doing your part. So if you carry a key, let it remind you of open doors. If you carry a magnet, let it remind you to focus on the opportunities and goals you are pursuing. If you carry cinnamon, let its scent remind you of gratitude and provision. But never give the object the place that belongs to God. The object is only a reminder. Your faith is in God. Your confidence is in God. Your hope is in God. And your responsibility is to faithfully use the wisdom, ability, opportunity, and resources that have already been placed in your hands. Don't chase fantasies. Don't look for shortcuts. Don't believe that one object can replace years of discipline. Don't expect a ritual to do what only wise action can accomplish. Instead, renew your mind, challenge your words, challenge your habits. Change your decisions. Keep learning, keep working, keep praying, keep trusting, and keep moving forward. You may not see the entire path today, but you can take the next step. You may not have everything you want today, but you can be grateful for what you have and become faithful with it. You may have made financial mistakes in the past, but your past does not have to become your permanent future. You can begin again. You can rebuild. You can learn. You can recover. You can become wiser. And with God's help, you can move into a different season. So don't carry these objects because you believe they contain supernatural financial power. Carry them if you choose because they remind you of the truth you want to keep before your mind. When you touch the key, remember opportunity. When you touch the magnet, remember focus. When you smell the cinnamon, remember gratitude. And every time you remember them, bring your attention back to God, faith, wisdom, diligence, and responsible action. Say this: I will not live in fear. I will not constantly speak lack. I will not allow yesterday's mistakes to control tomorrow. I will seek wisdom. I will work faithfully. I will manage what I have. I will recognize opportunities. I will make wise decisions. I will trust God for provision. I will remain grateful. I will keep moving forward. And then do something practical. Make the call. Assess the application. Learn the skill. Start the budget. Pay the bill. Save the money. Build the business. Ask for advice. Take the next step. Because faith is not merely something you say. Faith should influence the way you live. And remember, you don't have to become wealthy overnight to know that your life is changing. Sometimes the first miracle is that you stop being controlled by fear. Sometimes the first breakthrough is that you finally believe you can change. Sometimes the first open door is an idea. Sometimes it is a conversation. Sometimes it is a new skill. Sometimes it is a person who introduces you to an opportunity. Sometimes it is simply the wisdom to stop making the same mistake. Be sensitive to those moments. Be thankful for them. And when the opportunity comes, be prepared to act. If you know someone who is struggling financially, don't simply send them promises of instant riches. Give them encouragement. Help them think differently. Help them learn. Remind them that they are not hopeless. Encourage them to seek wise counsel and take practical steps. Let your words bring hope, not false promises. Let your faith produce action, not superstition. Let your confidence be in God, not in an object. And let your financial life become a testimony of wisdom, discipline, generosity, diligence, and faith. You are not required to have everything figured out today. You only need to take the next right step. Stay faithful, stay teachable, stay disciplined, stay grateful. Keep your heart full of faith and keep moving forward. The key may remind you of a door. The magnet may remind you of attraction and focus. And the cinnamon may remind you of abundance and gratitude. But the real transformation is taking place inside you. That is where the change begins. And as your thinking changes, your words change. As your words change, your actions can change. As your actions change, your habits can change. And as your habits change, your financial future can begin to look very different. So begin today, not with fear, not with desperation. not with superstition. Begin with faith, wisdom, responsibility, gratitude, and action, and trust God to guide you one step at a time.